welcome everybody. This is super exciting for us as well to actually do our first webinar like this. And again, yeah, we're going to do it on explosions because we are just kind of released. We just kind of released our, Houdini explosions in Houdini workshop, and I think this is and I think Rebelway is kind of known for doing explosions. So we thought this would be a really good first webinar. So yeah, welcome everybody to our first webinar ever. Yay! I think we're gonna start with, I think Caleb will just roll the workshop promo one more time, just in case you guys haven't seen it already. All right. So I think that's pretty cool. I think we spent like a couple of months working on that. So we're very proud of that. That's why we wanted to show it one more time. So the common question we actually get is, do we only do explosions at Rebelway? And the answer is no. That's not the only thing we do, even though that's kind of what we're known for. And we actually do magic as well. And magic and explosions actually go hand to hand in a lot of cases because, and I'm going to show you guys this. Look at this. Like I have a lot of things like that I want to go through before we actually go to the Houdini part. Then this is going to be mostly just covering the artistic elements of explosions. And that's why I think knowing your artistic elements with effects in general is super important. And this comes into play with explosions as well. I know many people don't actually connect the two together. They think, yeah, you just put some gas temperature and the explosion goes boom, but that's not the whole thing. You have to, in many cases, you have to art direct the explosion. Oh yeah, I'm not sharing my screen, I know. Wait, my God, share screen. There we go. So in case, yeah, I was just talking. But so this was the slide, and this is what we're gonna go through. These are the examples that we're gonna be talking about, and this is just gonna be the first like 20 minutes, I think, of the webinar. Then we're gonna go into the juicy stuff with actual Houdini, with the Houdini presentation. Look at this. Let me make this a bit bigger. And let me just see. Okay. So we're going to go through the presentation first. And so I was saying that magic, the artistic elements that you learned with doing magic is actually something that applies to explosions as well, because you can art direct explosions. And we also do environments at Rebelway, and we also do many other things, which I'm going to show you when we play this next video. And it's going to be a brief presentation and an overview of the Rebelway, the new website that we actually have at Rebelway. Welcome everybody to our brand new Rebelway website. I'm pretty sure most of you have already seen it, but we are actually quite proud of how it looks. If maybe some of you are the OG Rebelway fans, they remember the old website, and to be honest, I don't want to remember the old website. This is how I want to remember it. It's brand new and shiny. So what is Rebelway actually all about? We want to give the opportunity to anyone who wants to become a VFX or a CG professional, the opportunity to learn with us at as we would like to think, an affordable cost. If I give you a quick tour down the website, I think this is the most important area where we actually showcase what our students are actually capable of doing after the workshop. And I think this is the most important part. This is the thing that we want to show off with. And I wouldn't even call them students, to be honest. And I don't like using that word. What I like to call them are just our attendees. They attend our workshops. Some of them are beginners. Some of them are already seasoned veterans in VFX, and they just want to learn a new skill. Because as a lot of you know, you have people that specialize in, let's say, pyro or flip, but then you become the master at doing pyro, right? But you still want to learn how to do flip. Even though you are a seasoned VFX artist, you can still join us and then learn that other trade that you want to learn. And you can go down the website and just check it by yourself. This is our team, which is an ever-growing team of people. All of them are very seasoned already. We also have a free book. Anyway, you can do this by yourself. But what I really want to show you today is our courses. And obviously, most of you are here because of the Pyro webinar, and I'm going to show you how to do some explosions here just in a minute. If you're not here for explosions, you can leave, because that's the only thing we're going to be talking about. But if you are here for explosions, that you're more than welcome. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that we have a few new workshops. One of them is the explosion effects in Houdini. We also have the advanced shading in Arnold. The Houdini fundamentals is also quite new, and I would encourage anybody who is starting in the industry to check this one out, because this will really give you a boost if you're starting out with Houdini and FX and CG in general. We also have the futuristic UI design in Houdini. A lot of the people ask us, you only do destruction and explosions, right? And we said no. We also do futuristic UI design in Houdini. So, I think that's impressive. We also do advanced Houdini FX Rise and advanced Houdini FX the Chase. And I'm going to talk about the Chase a bit more because I think it's very important. We also have math for Houdini FX artist, because let's be honest, we both know, you and I, we don't know how to do math. And I never learned math in school. This is literally the first time I even heard of math. And then I opened Houdini and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do some crazy destruction. And then math punched me in the face. And we also have some tutorials that are on demand right now if you want to check them out. I want to show you the Houdini, advanced Houdini effects, the Chase. And I want to just showcase that a bit more because I think it's a very important workshop that we have. Okay, so why do I want to talk about this workshop in particular? Because the way we design workshops here at Rebelway is we reverse engineer the final output that we do. So essentially we start with the cinematic, the thing that you're seeing right here. We start with this, which means that we do all the work. We do the layout, we do the effects, we do all the camera, the cinematic shot creations. So we create a whole sequence. We do the compositing, we do the lighting, we do everything. And that's why this one is so important, because we show how to do everything on a cinematic shot, as you can see here. And we include a lot of the compositing in this one as well, and how to create cinematic cameras and how to create cinematic shots that actually have intensity, because all of this will help you with your visual effects. All of this, especially being a good compositor, is completely vital in doing effects. You will think that most effects look good when you render them, right? Wrong. They look the worst. I remember doing an effect and it was just a bunch of magic, particles, and electricity. It looked the worst when I rendered it. But I knew that I'm gonna make it look good in comp. And I did. But usually I would be very afraid at that point, because when that effect didn't look the way you would expect it to look, coming straight from Houdini, you start panicking. But if you have those compositing skills, you can say to yourself, it's completely fine. I'm going to make it, I'm going to fix it in post, which is exactly what we do all the time. And yeah, that's why I wanted to showcase this one. But let's get back to the webinar and actually talk a bit more about explosions. Hey, and we're back. That video was way longer than I anticipated. I'm going to share my screen right away because I might forget again. There we go. So I just saw a question, what render engine is the best for Houdini and what will I be using today? I just use Mantra most of the time, and we also use Arnold at Rebelway. And those are the two main ones. But honestly, I just do my Mantra most of the time. So let's get back to this. I actually want to go through this a bit faster and just show you the Houdini stuff sooner. So we also came a long way with explosions. If you guys remember our first Pyro workshop, it looked like this. So this had a bunch of problems in terms of shading. You can see the shading, it feels like it's just on top. It doesn't feel like it's well integrated. It doesn't have that crispy details that we have with the new explosions. I mean, look at this. Look at this. It's amazing. We didn't have that before, but what we had before was the custom combustion model that if some of you who took the first Pyro workshop, we're going to show how to do that in the new one, plus a lot of different examples. So we're kind of combining all of this. We're combining everything we did with the new tools and with the nuke explosion, which this one was very difficult to get right. And we're combining it with what we did before. But just look at so like I said, we learn as well as we go. And I think we learned quite a lot in the time from the time we did the first workshop. And again, yeah, these are the examples that we're going to be doing in the workshop. And I think they look pretty good. And these are all rendered with Mantra. And it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't really slow. This render, like the whole sequence, took maybe an hour and a half to render. Okay, so the art of explosions. So I just want to show you a lot of different explosions, and I'm going to talk about what makes them look good and what makes an explosion look good versus a bad CG explosion. And then we're going to be also be looking at some real life references. So this is a breakdown from the Avengers that ILM did, and you can see obviously the explosions are CG, but what makes this explosion so good? And one of the big things is it has different color variation, which is something that we were doing as well. So you can see there's color variation. You have black and you have some white smoke, and then you have some gray in betweens, and that's really important to break to make something look a bit more realistic, because most of the explosions you see out there that are CG, they're just gray, and that really breaks it. The second thing is you can see how their emission starts. They don't start the emission immediately. First you get just the smoke coming up, and then it kind of the flames come after the smoke. So it's almost like you would pour gasoline and then you light it on fire, and that makes it essentially you stage your explosion in different stages, in different steps. So not everything just happens at the same time, but you actually have stages. So you have stage 1 where you just have the smoke, stage 2 when it gets lit on fire, and then they also do multiple emissions of the explosion. So you can stage it up, and that comes then down to art directing. Because just imagine if this explosion was just one big puff and everything goes up, it's not very pleasing to look at. Also, one thing that people say with explosions is that you have to destroy the mushroom. Like the mushroom shape doesn't, that it makes it look super CG, if you have mushrooms. And that is actually not that true. Like every explosion has mushrooms. That's the whole thing. You're going to get mushrooms with explosions, even with real ones. There's no avoiding that. It's just what's going to make an explosion look good is actually breaking those mushrooms into more mushrooms. So let's say with this is all one big mushrooms, but look at it. It has multiple shapes to it. That's what you have to break, not the actual mushroom. You cannot break. I mean, this might be even better if it had more shapes like this. But this is the thing you have to break. You see, like you get multiple shapes. And that's the thing when people usually refer to when they say that you have to break the mushroom shapes. There's no other way of actually making an explosion without having these mushroomy shapes going up and billowing up, because that's what the real explosion does. And so I think we can all agree this looks pretty amazing. And you can see just based on this, on the breakdown that they have, I'm going to show you that what we're going to do in our workshop is actually the same thing. So look at this pass. If I go to Houdini quickly, and I start this render, you will see that, and I hope Mantra is a bit faster today than usual. There we go. So if we look at this pass, which is this is the emission pass. So you have the smoke, you have your emission, and then you have the emission multiplied by the density. And this is what gives you the really cool, crispy shapes. This is one of the tricks how to get this. And so you see we're getting this, which is, I think it's really close to what we just saw with Avengers, which is just crazy that we're able to do these kind of explosions now, that we can actually match the level that they have on this multi-million budget movies. So this is the combined density multiplied with emission. But if we just go to the emission part, you can see this is looking exactly the same as in Avengers. So the way we learned all of these techniques was actually just watching breakdowns and seeing how they do it on the big movies. And that's how we learn as well, by just looking at breakdowns and trying to figure out how to do all of these techniques. But you can see when you multiply the emission with the density, and I can showcase just the density. This is how the density map looks like. And then we use this map. Just imagine like an alpha map, and then you multiply this with the emission, and you get the nice details that we all want. I think this looks pretty good. Anyway, let me go back to Premiere. So I just wanted to go through a bunch of different things. This is the same kind of technique, very similar, that we used in one of our other promos that we did. But this one is actually using a bit of that inverted shading technique that maybe some of you guys, maybe you heard of it, the inverted pyro shader. And you can see it here on this Destiny cinematic as well. Now, I'm going to be this is my personal opinion. I'm going to be going through these cinematics and just telling you guys what I think works and what doesn't. And this is in no means me like talking badly about the work that the artist did, because I'm going to be showcasing some of my work as well that I think doesn't look the best. But this is just all for academic purposes. We're just, I'm just showing you guys what works and what doesn't, and the different ways that people render explosions, and why this way that we're going to be showcasing in our workshop is, I think, the best way that you can do explosions right now. But you can see the inverted shader here happening. And also it's a bit blown out. and it just doesn't look right. The reason why we were doing the inverted shader is because that was the way that we got these black crispy details. If we inverted the shader, not inverted it, you just remap the emission, so it kind of gives you that flamey look, and I'm going to show you how that looks. So this is a cinematic that I worked on, and this is my explosion. And you can see I was doing the same thing. We were going for that gassy explosion, fiery gassy explosion look, and there's a bunch of things going wrong here that it should be more bright, because if it's a really, I mean, we wanted to expose for the flames in this case, but I think they should be brighter. But you can see here I was doing the inverted shader technique as well. And the reference that we had for that was, I mean, it's not that far off. So this is a real life flamey explosion, almost like a flamethrower. Actually, there's a flamethrower. And this is the result that you have. And that's kind of what we were going for with that reference, with that explosion. Let me come back to it. And in some cases, we actually succeeded in making it look kind of similar. The reason, but I'm not the biggest fan of this. Like when I worked on this, I still didn't exactly know how to make details like this. So the inverted kind of shader technique was the only way to do it. The thing that I like about this explosion is it has multiple stages. And that's what I was telling you guys when I was talking about art directing explosions. So you have this, and then you have the really intense burst of flames coming out of the barrel because he just shot a flaming arrow to it. And that creates a shape, and then that shape almost disappears. It implodes, and then it explodes. And we have this one first big explosion happening, and then a second one. And you can see there's one big one, and then the second one happens, and it creates these shapes and the ground, the dust wave. It has multiple stages, and you have to think about explosions like that, so you have to think about how to make it more impactful than it actually is. This is another good example about that I think they were kind of doing the same thing that we are, where they were multiplying the emission with the density, and it just looks amazing. And they were doing I mean, it almost looks they are changing the color in the smoke. But the reason why this works so well is actually there's a different reason, and that reason is the Fibonacci sequence. And this is something that blew my mind when I first heard about it. And it's actually something you can apply to everything, not just explosions and not just effects, but you can apply this to music. You can apply this to your art, anything really. And the Fibonacci sequence is something that you can also call the power ramp. So if you have a ramp like this, this is kind of the power ramp. So you want, essentially you want a lot of small pieces and then not a lot of big pieces, and then, medium amount of medium pieces. I know it makes it's very intuitive, but if you look at this tree, you have one big trunk like here, and then you have 21 small pieces. And this gives you a perfect ratio between small, medium to big pieces. And see here, this is that scale actually. You see how many small emissions you have with the sparks and the trails, and then you have one big explosion. But even that big explosion is separated into multiple shapes. And that's what you have to look into. See, this is a medium-sized shape. This is a big shape, medium, medium, medium. Obviously, there's one big shape doing everything, but then you have a lot of small ones happening here. And this is kind of the Fibonacci sequence in play here. So you have, 50 of these, you have 10 of the medium ones, and then you have 2 of the bigger shapes happening here. And this is perfectly demonstrated in Star Wars. Because with Star Wars, you see this, you see how many sparks they add? So they really play on that concept where with a lot of small details and, you know, obviously destruction and RBD, you create a big sense of scale, because the more of the small things you have and sparks and RBD and, you know, all of these elements that fill out the explosion, the bigger the explosion is going to feel. And it's going to make it look, I don't know how to call it, more meaty, like, you know. And this is a good example as well. And here you can actually see all the small trails that are happening. And then you have, you know, again, this is really important. That's why I'm repeating this. You have shapes. That's how I see explosions. All I see is these shapes. And then one big shape, and then a lot of small shapes. This is all I see. I just see shapes. And that's how you should look in explosions. And this is where you start art directing. And you can see they are doing the same thing. They're multiplying, they have the emission paths, they're multiplying it with the density, and that's how they get the nice and crispy explosions. And I just love watching it. I mean, look at this. Oh my God. Oof, so good. Here, another example of how many small details they added. And that's really important. The small details are sometimes more important than the big ones. Just amazing. I think this is one of my favorite explosions ever made. Look at how many small, I'm not sure how well it shows on the stream. But look, you can check this out. I think Last Jedi bombing. I think if you go the Last Jedi ILM breakdown, you're going to be able to see all of this in HD. But just amazing stuff. Another good example from King Kong. I think this movie is super underrated in terms of effects. What they were doing with this movie, like visually, it's so stunning. Just amazing stuff. Like, look at how much detail they were getting in the fire simulation. This is something this is actually a good topic maybe for the next webinar. We might do a flamethrower, and I can show you guys how to get all of these details in the flame as well, because the flamethrower is just a bit different than doing like a classic explosion. This is not related to explosions, but I think it just looks so cool. I think this movie has one of the best effects ever. It's in terms of water and fur and what they were doing with like scale in general. It's just so good. But there's an explosion coming as well. That's why I'm showing you guys this. There's going to be an explosion. So this one, look at this. This looks so full, even though it doesn't make any sense. So he just had, I think, a couple of grenades on him, and this exploded in the most brutal way. How did this happen here? Like, he had the grenade. I guess maybe he dropped it from his hand, but this is just huge for the grenade that he had. But it's so good. Look at the small details they added. So this is what I'm saying. This looks so huge because it has so many small details. And this is something I wanted to add to our explosions as well. So when we were doing these guys, I was adding a lot of the debris, but it's just not visible. You can see it here. There's I should have added even more debris for sure. But you see how many sparks I added as well, just to emphasize the scale. And then obviously I added the environment as well to showcase this. So back to this explosion, it just looks amazing, and it's so beefy. It's so good the way it explodes. It has so many details, so many small shapes that it makes it look amazing and huge. Another, this is a bit old, I guess, but it doesn't matter because this is art directing. This is going to be all art directing, and I'm going to tell you why in a second here. So again, these explosions, if you look at the shader, in some cases, it almost looks like that just basic pyro shader that we want to get away from. Like nobody really likes the basic pyro shader. That's why they, with Houdini 18.5, they created the scatter shader, and you can now combine it with the fire pass and all of that. And in general, this, like when you on a still frame, this doesn't look the best. But why this works is because of the animation. The animation of this explosion is amazing. How fast it explodes, how many small elements it has. You see the sparks and everything, the debris, how the debris covers up the explosion. You see the shapes it creates, the spiky shapes, and the ratio. And the ratio comes back to the Fibonacci sequence. Like this is a perfect example of the Fibonacci sequence again. And they were breaking the shapes quite well again. You see, it's not just one plume, it's not just one mushroom, it's multiple mushrooms. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying art direction. So yeah, when I'm talking about art directing the explosions, you see this one, like I'm not the biggest fan of this shader, to be honest. It looks super stylized and it doesn't fit this cinematic. This cinematic is supposed to be super realistic, the way they were portraying it, and this shader looks almost cartoony. But look how fast it explodes, and that's why it gives it. It still feels like a really massive blast, and it still works. It portrays the emotion, what they were trying to show with that effect, and that was that he got hit really hard, but he still keeps walking forward. So it's not all about the shading techniques. It's in a lot of cases, it's about how you know how to art direct your explosion. So it creates the emotion and it moves the piece forward. And when I say the piece, I mean the cinematic or like whatever trailer or movie that you're doing. So this is a cinematic from Titanfall. And this almost had the right details, but still not quite. And I believe this was done with Fume Effects. And it did have the, kind of the crispy shapes, but it's still not the right kind of crispiness that they had here in Star Wars, right? It's not the same crispiness, and it's not the same crispiness that we have in our explosions. Maybe not this crispiness. And I think they were also doing the inverted shader in that one. But they also had some geolights. So you can just use the volume and convert it into a VDB and turn that into a geolight, and that will give you this inside illumination of the explosion. But that is really slow to render. And with the new scatter techniques, you actually don't have to do it. This is another example from ILM, and this is back in the day where they also didn't have that scattering technique. Like they still didn't perfect the crispiness that they have right now. That's why I wanted to show you guys. But it's still, the explosion looks good. It just doesn't have the right shader yet applied. Like here. So this is a very similar shot with the explosion, right? With the ship exploding. But what Megalese did, they have this nailed down. They have the look, the scatter look with the crispiness, and I think it looks way better than what they did on the battleship. Obviously, it's an older movie. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just comparing the two shots, and this one to me looks way better. And again, the Fibonacci sequence is amazing. This is one of my favorite explosions, and we obviously borrowed from it in our nuke explosion that we did. And this just goes to show, like when they did these passes, you can see this explosion doesn't have a lot of details. it actually looks super low res. But with the comp and the secondary elements and all the passes, all the glow passes, it looks amazing. And because it happens so fast, and the speed of it, again, art direction, it just looks amazing. It looks like the biggest thing ever. But when you break it down into layers, it's not that high detail. So don't be concerned with voxel count. A lot of people, they think the more voxels you have, the better your explosion is going to look like, but that's usually not exactly the case. You can create something that looks super high detailed and amazing with a low voxel count. So this is another example that we were trying to imitate with our workshop, this kind of spiky explosions that happen. And I have a perfect real life reference for this as well that I'm going to show you in a second. But here you can actually see how they did it. And I really like watching breakdowns like this. I'm pretty sure they didn't use these particle sims for the actual emission. I think this is something that animators have to showcase where the effect is going to be. And then they create different emissions. Actually, I think they have the same emissions that we are going to show in our workshop. I mean, to be honest, we came really close to this result, and that was kind of the goal. Like if you look at this, that's pretty much, it's so fast. But yeah, that's pretty much almost like a one-to-one reference to the Avengers. It's another example from Star Wars. I mean, look at this. Amazing. Just so good. I could look, I think I saw this clip like a million times. But again, like maybe it's not here, but yeah, just like this one, the multiple stages, the way it explodes. So it explodes once. It explodes once, and then it has another internal explosion happening, like here, and then another big one. So you can see the stages. It has 3 stages. That's the blocking of explosions. That's going to make it look more interesting, bigger, and yeah, that's what you should be looking for. And then these explosions are the ones that we're going to give you the free HIP files at the end. So if you stick to the end, we're going to be giving free HIP files to these setups, and these are done with Houdini 18.5. So we just tweaked them a bit to make this carpet bombing happening and having all the trails with sparks and lights at the end. So I think it's a cool example. This is a different kind of explosion. I'm not sure who did this. I'm not sure if it's ILM, but it's on Avengers. And it's something that Saber, the CEO of Rebelway, did as well. So we did this one, which is very similar to the other explosion in Avengers. It's a completely different type of shading. And it's very interesting to see as well. And it doesn't use this concept, the emission multiplied by density. It's a different concept that it uses. And yeah, it's very interesting to see. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be showing some of this in the workshop as well. And this is another example of that shading technique. And this is from our cinematic as well that we did. All right, so these are, I think, all the CG explosions that I had. And yeah, this is the thing I forgot earlier, but yeah, the first 30 people will get a 10% discount, and the discount will expire in 5 hours, maybe a bit more. I'm not sure, but yeah, it has a time block on it. So if you are undecisive, if you want to join our workshop or not, I think now it's the time to do it. So looking at cinematics and movies is one thing, and it's good because they had concept art, and they had, in a lot of cases they were looking at real references as well. So if you do explosions, and just like as an FX artist, you have to look at real life references. And Action VFX, actually, they have amazing detailed explosions. If you go to their website, you can just see they actually shot these on camera. So these are real explosions that they have, and real like smoke bursts. And you can just see how much detail this has, and how like it almost starts raining down at the end. And this is something I wouldn't think of if I didn't see this reference, but it makes it look so satisfying. And because it's mostly a smoke explosion like this, it doesn't have a lot of temperature, so it actually goes down super fast. Like it's hot in the beginning, but then it goes down. You see, like it's almost like buoyancy is -1. So this is a good place to get references. This is another good reference that I was showing you before. And in some cases, it just looks unrealistic almost, because you don't see explosions like this from this perspective. But see how the fire just climbs up and catches the fuel on fire. And this is just so interesting to me to see. And then look at all the small, you see all the small things at the end, like the fuzziness of the droplets happening. Like this is something, if you want to create something that looks super realistic like this, like you would have to take that into account. Yeah, just some nuclear explosions. I think this one is super interesting. You see the ring that it creates? I'm not sure what exactly that gas is and how it creates it, but it just looks so unrealistic, and you would never think of it. Because if you would do this in an explosion, it would almost look fake, but it's actually like this happens in real life with explosions. And it's something that we actually did when I was doing the nuclear explosion. If you look closely, you see this black shell that's happening. So that was the gas leaving the explosion. And that's why this explosion feels like it has multiple stages, because it actually has. It has the first stage, it explodes, expands super fast, and then all the rings appear. And it feels like it has multiple stages. And like I said, it's because it has. And also I think this is pretty cool, like how the ring shows at the top, and the setup is actually procedural. So the rings are actually showing based on the height of the explosion. So yeah, we're going to show how to do this in the workshop. Okay, guys, we're almost at the end, and then we go to Houdini. Another really cool reference, and this is the one, the spikiness that I was telling you about, the spiky reference. And this is probably what the Avengers guys were also looking at. So you see the difference in color variation. You have some ground that is actually more brownish dark, and then you have white, and then you have more grayish dark smoke happening. And this is based on what ground it hit. And the important thing here is you can see how they don't billow. These explosions, they don't billow that much because they don't have a lot of temperature. They're mostly done, and they don't have much gas in it or burn. They're mostly done with just smoke, and they don't billow up. They actually, see how straight these lines are. They're so pointy, and they just kind of break apart a bit. They never become a full mushroom shape. And I think this is something we achieved quite well as well with this one. If you look at here, at this part, see it just goes up. It never actually breaks. And this is something that is difficult to do, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And then you have some of them that actually billow out like this. And this is something, and this goes back to when I was saying that some people say you have to, CG explosions, they create mushroom shapes. It's not true. Like this all creates a mushroom shape at the end. That's just how it is. That's how That's how the smoke expands, and in real life as well. But again, look at the difference in color as well here. So that's quite important. And then another one that I think was just so good. In terms of, you see how much detail there is in with the chunks of the ship happening? It's actually quite important, coming back to the Fibonacci sequence, having all of those shapes, and they fly way more up in the sky because they're smaller and they go way off the screen, and that's also important when you're art directing. Okay, and the last one. This one was interesting, the way. So this one actually looks like that explosion from Titanfall that I was showing you before. So this really goes to show how many different explosions are going to create different type of emission. So not the scatter shader doesn't actually apply. I mean, you can do this with the scatter shader, but I'm just saying you cannot, not every explosion has the same look. So you have to take that into account when you're creating explosions, that not all of them actually have the same look. Okay, guys, I think this is it for the references part and the kind of the artistic part. Did you guys enjoy that part? Because I really like talking about stuff like this and just looking and going through the references. I mean, do you guys like stuff like that? Because if you do, in the next webinar, we can do more of these and just showcase more references and breakdowns. Okay, because I think this is the most fun. Just gathering references. You know, when you're working in a studio and they give you a shot to do, and then you spend like 3 days just looking at references and gathering data. It feels like you're a scientist gathering data and trying to evaluate how to do this effect for real before you, and then you start calculating the forces and how much fuel you have to inject and how big is the space and everything. I just find that super fascinating. But yeah, let's go to Houdini. I think we have enough of enough of the references for now. So this is the gas explosion. This is the big gas explosion that I did. Can I hide this? And I'm not sure. Yeah, I won't be able to show you this explosion in real time. I think in the end it had like 300 million voxels, but like I said, it's not about the voxels. In this case, I think the important part is that I wanted to show you is the shapes. I think they were quite interesting. And if you look at the shapes at the top, they don't break. Like I was showing you in the spiky reference, they don't billow out. They actually just stay sharp. Look at this. And this is something that was really difficult for me to do and to figure this out. And it took me a lot of experimenting to get to this point. So obviously you have some of them that are billowing out, but these ones, look how sharp they stay. They never break. Yeah, so see, they stay sharp and then they just kind of, they never billow out into like a ball of flames or smoke that you would expect. And I think I was quite proud to get that result. And let me just quickly go to the explosion scatter, show you and maybe if we try to render this quickly, I will show you guys the setup for this just in a second. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Especially, I like these parts the most that don't have a lot of emission anymore, but you still get the black spots happening. And then this looks super, super nice the way it's illuminating the smoke from all the emission. Okay, so how to actually achieve this? How to do this? So this is the setup. All of this is important to do this, for this explosion in particular. And the way we start is with just simple shapes. We do a noise on a sphere. So we grab a sphere, we do some noise. This is like that drawing tutorial. You're like, yep. You start with a sphere, you do some noise, and then you simulate. And then you get this. But no, for real, the way you do this is you noise it up. I'm not going to go, like this will take, we're going to go node by node how to do this in the workshop. It's impossible for me to do this in a 1 hour webinar. I just want to explain the logic behind it. So you noise it up, and we created this tool where you can modify the shapes. So you can randomize the shape, you can do the outward expansion, you can do the directional expansion. So you can increase the spikes, or you can increase just the bulginess of the whole thing. And then you can also just shape it like this. And it's super easy, to be honest. We're just using some dot products and multiplying the noise with the normal. And it's really easy to do something like this. And most of these tools that I'm going to show you are simple, but it's the way you use them. It's the combination you use them. Okay, you scatter the points. And then I was animating them with another tool that we created. And the way we have, the reason we have this one is just so I could control it manually. So this is not a simulation. I'm just animating points. I'm animating points based on time, based on their velocity. So this is just so I can animate, see how poppy it is. It's really explosive in the beginning. It's almost like time remapping it. And I am time remapping it to a degree with this slider. So I can make it even more explosive. If I don't have this slider, it's going to be very linear. But to be honest, you don't have to do this. In a lot of cases, you can just do a popnet. But if you do a popnet, you're going to get the same thing. So this one even looks better. It has more definition. And the way you do this is, you do a popnet. You can do all points, or maybe just points. Something like this. 4 points. And then you inherit more velocity, and they're just going to die. And that's how I would do it. Maybe you put this to 5, and then the only thing I did different here was I added a pop replicate, and I was changing the inherent velocity here. So I was fitting it between 0.1 and 1 based on the random ID on the point. And that was giving me, see these clumps that are happening here. Maybe if I burn more. That's too much. I mean, maybe, not really. You get really nice shapes with this. So it doesn't really matter. That's what I'm trying to say. You can do it with a popnet, or you can go fancy and do your own animation thing. You can always just re-ramp this with retime. So you reanimate it so it's poppy in the beginning. That's it. What else? We connected. I was creating, so with this attribute wrangle in a for loop, I'm just creating additional points. You can see I'm just copying points based on their velocity and adding them to their new position. And the reason I'm doing this is because you need a trail. So from these points, I want to create a trail and then create a primitive between them. So create a line, just connect them. And this is going to give me a better emission, even though I later on scatter points again on it. But it was just giving me more details. And then sometimes you need more points than this, just so your volume is, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. You need more points, so the VDB you do at the end, I mean the volume you do at the end is has more details. So I was doing the jitter here. Let me show you. I think I need less points here. A jitter was important because it was giving me this. It stayed pointy at the end, and then I was scaling it up at the bottom. So it was giving me these firework kind of shapes. And the way I did it, I used the curve view. I don't know where it was. Yeah, here, the curve view attribute to multiply the scale, the p scale. Yeah. So then you use p scale here, and that's how you do it. So you can see even just from this, you can see the beginning of this explosion. And you have to do it from the beginning. That's the trick. Your emitter has to look like an explosion in the beginning. If your emitter is just a sphere or something random, your initial shapes will not be good. And then I created the rasterize. And an important thing here, so you see they're quite broken up and spiky, the shapes from the beginning. If they're not broken up and spiky in the beginning, this will, like I said, it won't work. And the way you break them up is with just some noises. And I was breaking up the noise on the particles before you rasterize it. So you get this. And then this usually helps as well, the point velocity. I don't know why it's off here. I think it should be on. So this is your first emitter. And as you can see here, I have multiple emitters. Actually, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 emitters. And the second emitter is actually the same thing from the same shape. The only difference is this one is for longer shapes. So this one creates these shapes here that are kind of longer, and it's going to give you, this will break up your explosion. That's why you have to create these shapes like that. And this whole setup is the same. It just has less points. And then I'm doing everything the same. This literally just copy pasting the setup. And then here on the right, I have the pump. And this is also a trick. So you have your emitter. So this is actually going to be emitting density and temperature. And on the right, you have a pump. What the pump is going to do is the pump is going to be pushing the velocities upwards. And that's super important. And you can see it's the same. It's the same thing. They overlap, but the pump is actually longer. And so if you look at this one, just this one strand, the pump actually it's the same, but it's containing the whole emitter here. And it's actually longer, and it's going to live longer for a couple of frames. And this is the push that you need, the push in your pump to create those shapes that don't break up. Because if you don't have the pump like this, if you only have velocities coming, from your emitter like this, it's going to create ugly velocities. And I don't have an example to show you guys, but I think you know what I mean. So if you do this and pump a lot of velocity, you won't get nice shapes. You have to pump it with a pump. And this is the way to do the pump. If you don't do it like this, it's not going to work properly. And then I have the burn here. I think it's just, this one adds just a bit of burn in the emitter. And then I have another emitter that looks like this. And this is more for the ground. And all of these emitters, and this one also has a bump that looks exactly the same. It's just bigger. Like I was saying, you need the same thing, bigger, and it has to be alive for 3 more frames to actually push the velocities in the right direction. Because if you just, like I said, inject velocities in this one, in your main emission, I mean, in your main emitter, it's not going to work properly. And then after you have all of that, there's still more stuff to add. So you can see how I'm really adding a lot of small details to create this. It's not just one emission and that's it, and then let the the simulation do its thing. That's not really it. Like, I'm really specific with my emitters. And the next one is, I'm not sure if I think in this case, I used it as, let me see. So I used this as a collider. Not in this one. In the next one I'm going to show you, I use this one as a collider. In this one, I just used it as an emission as well. And I was emitting. So let me show you what this is first. It's a RBD simulation. And it looks like this. And I know with Houdini 18.5, you get these trails, right? You get the trails SOP. And that's great. The thing that the trails SOP doesn't do is it doesn't give you rotation. And it doesn't give you the randomness that you get from an RBD sim. And this is a really simple RBD sim. It's, again, it has that shape, breaking it up, and just doing the sim. And I'm just adding random velocities to your angular velocity, and I'm using the same velocities that I'm getting from these shapes. So this velocity that I'm getting here is the same velocity that I then use to just, push everything outwards. And that gives you random rotation, and it gives you random chunks, and some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. And I don't think you can get this kind of detail with just using the new Houdini tools. And that's what I'm saying, that sometimes it's better if you know how to do this from the ground up so you can build it yourself. After we do the RBD, I connect them like this. So I do a trail and then a connection again. Because if you don't do a connection, this won't work properly. You always need, so either you do a long trail like this, or you have to create more subsamples in your explosion. But as soon as you create more subsamples, it's going to change up your explosion. So if you go to advanced and use substeps, it's going to change up your explosion. In some cases, it's better if this is like 3 and 2. That's usually what I do, but in this case, 1 and 1 was just fine. And that's why you have to create a trail, because on each substep, like if it's just one piece here, it's going to be trailing, or it's going to miss the explosion because it's going to be traveling too fast. But if you have a whole trail, it will still, let me show you this in a better way. So if you look at the explosion, and this, is this even at the same spot? Yeah. So like this, go back. So these guys, the trails are traveling much faster than the explosion. And if they're not trails like this, you see this trail, if you would just be using the piece, it would be up here. It wouldn't be affecting the sim anymore. But because it's a trail, it's going to trail it softly upwards. And that will help tremendously, especially in the beginning with the simulation. But in this case, I was only using this one on the right. So it's the same setup. It's the same setup. It just has less pieces. And I was using this as an emission. And let me just show you guys, where is it? And I was emitting density, temperature, and divergence with this. And this is how it looks here. And there's a bunch of cool tricks that we did here. Let me see where I have them. So this has live. An attribute called live, and it's just based on the length. Maybe it's better if I showcase it here. I think it's better here, yeah. Yeah, so this one. So the color. So we have an attribute called life that will slowly just decay. And you can see it's decaying differently per our strand. Like it's not the same for all of them. So they will we use this map to slowly kill them off. And then we have another one called falloff. And the falloff just controls the falloff based on each curve. And then we use those to multiply them here. We use the falloff and live. We multiplied it with our density. And this creates, where is it? See these really nice kind of strands, and they're going to slowly die off. And this is really important that they slowly die off, because if it dies off too fast, it's not going to be, it's not going to look natural. And that's how, when we add everything together with all of our emitters that we talked about before, so all of these guys, and then we add together with this, it creates essentially this explosion. Or you know what, maybe in this case, I wasn't using the spikiness. And I think the spikes I'm going to show you in the next example, I think I wasn't using these guys here. And it could be that I was just using this left emitter plus this one. Yeah, I think that's what it is. But I was definitely using all of the spikiness, all of these guys in the next example that I'm going to show you. So what happens next is, after you have all of your emitters like this, we do something called, we combine them. Otherwise, you have a lot of different temperatures and divergences, and it's okay. It's still going to work, but if you combine them, it's going to go from 3 million voxels to 1, and it's going to be a bit more clean. So if we go inside, so maybe some of you in this case, I just use the Pyrosolver that they have, like this. But if you go inside here, you will just be prompted to where you can add your microsolvers in terms of divergence and disturbances. And I wanted to change some of those settings. So if you just open it up, you can go inside, and then you can go inside again. And this is where they do see the forces and everything. So I did that, and I went inside and I modified this a bit. And again, it's going to be difficult to show everything that we did here in this webinar. This is going to be done from scratch in the workshop, but we just wanted to showcase you guys the workflow and how it works. In terms of forces, there's nothing that intimidating here. It's just a bunch of gas disturbances and a confinement. In the gas disturbance, I like to use velocity as my mask. If you don't use velocity as your mask, the disturbance is going to be all over the place. You don't want your disturbance happening here on areas that are already slow. You just want the disturbance happening at the top where everything is moving fast, and you want just some disturbance happening in the slow areas. That's why your control range can be from 0.5 to 3 in terms of on velocity. To do this, you have to unlock your disturbance, go inside, go to this vex part, go here, put velocity here, calculate the length, and that's it. You have to put down length, velocity, and that will create a speed ramp, a speed map that you can then use, a speed field that you can use here. So I have a bunch of them that are at different scales and different strengths as well. So see 0.2, 0.1, 0.08, 0.06. Here is where I put in my, actually these are the pumps. I'm going to show you this in the next example. And then I create a bunch of different turbulences as well. This is a cool trick that I'm going to show you. This gas disturbance is actually using a thing called speed. So like I was saying here with the velocity controlling the disturbance, I really like that idea, but I wanted to have on my turbulence as well. And there isn't a way to do this. Like if you go here and try to find where it is, you won't find it. There is, at least I couldn't, a way to calculate the length of your velocity and just use it in the control field. So what you have to do is you have to create your own field and calculate the length of it. So you create a field called speed with the gas match field. You analyze the length of your velocity and put it into your speed field. And then you just remap that speed field based on how high your velocity is. And this will create, this works. And this isn't the fastest simulation. It's definitely not Ambergen speed. See this? So this is that map. And I'm going to let it sim a bit longer. And you will see that it's going to change based on the speed of the simulation. And I think that's really important because you don't want your disturbance and you don't want your gas turbulence to be all over the place. And that's one of the biggest things that people do wrong, I think, in explosions, is their disturbance is just like all over the place. And the same as with turbulence. And this will slowly ramp it off. So in areas that are slowing down, it's going to be applying less turbulence. And I did this with, just the one. But it's a really cool trick to do. And then, you have to put your speed field in the control field because it's actually being calculated. Here, you can see the speed field. So I think that's it for this explosion. I'm not sure. Maybe I can show you guys some other tricks. Oh, yeah. Okay, no, that's not true. So when you cache this, you have an explosion, right? And you have some tools now to Pyro. So you have the bake volume, which I'm going to show you guys later, but you have the post process as well. So this will kind of show you some of the scattering. I haven't used this one that much, but yeah, you can change the emission scale here and kind of see. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the values that are appropriate for this explosion, but so you can see your scattering. That's what I'm trying to say. But with the tool that we have, and we're gonna show you how to build this, is it shows you everything here, which is super handy. And you can actually switch between just density, scatter, and then you can also check your temperature blur. And the way this works is, like I said before, you create your temperature, you blur it like this, and then you multiply it with the density. And that gives you the nice crispiness that you can see in the final result. And we can showcase this in... Now, I'm not going to show you how exactly this was made, but we're going to build it in the workshop. But I think it's really cool. So you can go to your temperature blur and you can do one pass So this is blurring just one time. And this is blurring your temperature, by the way. Or you can do it 3 times, and you can see it's going to be, it's going to change a bit. You can have this is how much you're blurring it, so the voxel radius. So if you do 1 pass and then blur it twice, blur it 4 times, you can see this is how it's going to work. And then you can visualize it here already in the viewport, which is super handy. And then once you do this, you're kind of ready to go to your rendering, but obviously you have to do your shader. So the shader takes that information, the scatter field that we created, the scatter field, and it puts it into emission that you can see here. And this is actually quite cool, like I was showing you before. You can control a bunch of things with this. And you can add fire elements as well. So it's not just the scattering aspect, but there's a way to add just a fire to this as well. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't know the actual values that I would have to put in here. But like I was showing you, you can just showcase the emission. You can showcase the density, and then you can change your map here. So you can see this map is going to be changing. So if you want more detail, if you really want to go extreme with the crispiness, you can do this. Like that. And now do emission. And you can see now we have, it almost looks like that Star Wars reference that we had. One that I like the most. Where is it? Like here, they were really pushing the crispiness. And obviously there's a lot of comp that you have to do with this, but see how crispy this is. And then, I mean, I think we're pushing it a bit too much. But yeah, that's how you would change this. And it's super intuitive and it works really well. And then obviously you can go lower with this as well. It's quite fast, super real time. So this is one example. And the next one that I'm going to show you is the spikes. Let me just check this. Yeah, I'm checking the comments a bit. Love the crispiness. Yeah, it's all about I call it the crispy chicken. The crispy chicken details. You know that joke where they do explosions from chicken nuggets? That's the thing. So in this cases, I think we were using the normal pyro, not the sparse. But you can use the sparse as well. The thing with Houdini 18 sparse was, and I haven't tested this if they fixed it in 18.5, it was creating weird stepping. And we're going to show this in the workshop, all the tests that we did. I think we did like 100 different simulations with this. And we're going to test this. We're going to show you the tests. It was doing a weird stepping on the edge of the explosions. And that is because they just have to expand the area of the where the sparse is happening. They just have to expand it a bit. And I'm not sure if they fixed that in 18.5, but that's why we were using the normal solver. But it's the same thing. It's just the sparse feature is off. Yeah, the stepping is weird. Yeah, the default, but it's not just the bounce scale. Even if you increase the bounce scale, the sparseness was still covering, like it was too close to the field. And I'm not sure how to fix that if you go inside the solver. But anyway, so this is the second example that I wanted to show you guys. And you can see here, this one takes a bit longer to render. But you can see the changes, the differences in color, and that really helps. That's a big component when it comes to explosions, to have the difference in color. And that's not that people don't do this a lot, and I think it should be done more often. You can push it as well. You saw it with the real life references that we did. You can push this quite a lot to where like one strand can be, where is it? Like some strands, no, it's not this one. It's this one. Like this strand here is white and this one is completely gray. And they're coming from the same thing. And you can push this quite a lot in terms of color. And it's not going to look that weird. And obviously in comp, you can do some color grading on top of it so you can unify it a bit more. But yeah. So these are just a couple of passes. This is just density, lights, and this is the emission. And obviously the crispy chicken is here as well. And I apologize because I'm not reading the question, guys, but if you stick till the end, I'm going to be reading some of the questions. If you can just like ask them again at the end, that would be great. So this setup, and let me pull this up. So it has a couple of different elements. So the element, the ground element and the explosion element is separate. I don't know why they're not the same. But these are separate elements, and this is a smart way of doing things. You don't have to do everything in one sim. Sometimes it makes sense, but in most cases it doesn't. You have to do it in multiple sims, and it's just going to look better. And if we go to our setup, you can see it's the same as with the spiky, as with the gas explosion. I just repurposed the same setup and made it a bit different. And like I said, in the previous one, I kind of forgot, but I actually was, I wasn't using this part of the setup with the gas explosion. I was just using this, but here I am using all of them. So again, you just create these spiky shapes with your emitter, and this can be quite simple, like you saw before with the pop solver, or you can go fancy, like with your own tools if you need to. And then you break the shapes quite a lot, because that's important. And you can see the velocity and everything. The point velocity is breaking, how that is breaking the velocity field. You can see this is really nice and sharp. And that's what you want to keep. You want to keep the sharpness. The way to keep the sharpness is with the pump, like we discussed. So you have these guys. And so this emitter and this one, and they're the same, except that the one on the right is just covering the whole emitter. And that is pushing everything up. And that is really important. So in this case, I am using this as a collider, as you can see here. I'm pushing it through the collision, and then I'm using this emission that we also did from the RBD, and I'm using it for just emitting temperature and density. The reason why I have life and gradient here is for that same reason where I showed you I'm multiplying life and gradient, and I'm multiplying that with the density. So if you just look at the density here, it's going to slowly die off. See? It has a really nice... Don't die on me, Houdini. We're back. Okay. See the gradient it creates, and it really slowly dies off. And that's really important when it comes to these things. Otherwise, it would just die off. It has to slowly die off, and that will create that propagation of shape upwards. So we combine all the emitters here. And so that's the main emitter. That's it. And you can see this almost looks like the main shapes from the spikiness. And then you push it through the Pyrosolver. And the Pyrosolver is pretty much the same as the one that I showed you before. And I'm not going to go through these details. I mean the controls. I will say this in the workshop. We will go through. The workshop is you can join as a beginner as well, because we show how to do stuff from the beginning and how to change these values and what everything means. So if you're a beginner wanting to do explosions, that's also fine. But we're going to cover the advanced topics as well. It's impossible to show everything in this webinar, like for beginners. But if you guys like it, maybe we can do like a beginners webinar as well, where we show how to do everything from scratch, like a really simple explosion. So let's see if this works as well. So you can see the collider is pushing everything outwards. Like it's going to be pushing it outwards because everything is happening so fast in the beginning. That's why I was saying you need the strands to actually keep pushing it outwards for a bit longer, because if it's not a strand, those pieces would be way away from the explosion already, and they wouldn't be affecting the explosion. And that's not what you want. You want it to be affecting it. That's why you have the strands. If you guys are seeing this and wondering what the hell, why is there a smoke solver here? This is something that Stephen Nipping showed me, and it's in his class. It's a fix for the color, for the alpha. So the alpha works properly with the color. And I'm not going to go into it here, but essentially you just copy this part, that is responsible for that alpha, and then you just plug it in here. It doesn't have to be plugged here, but then it gives you an error. So I just like it to be plugged. So in this case, everything is pretty much the same. We also have a wind that is pushing everything away. And the wind is this plugin that I use. It's called Blow It. You can find it on Gumroad, I think. What it's doing is essentially just creating a volume field. That's it. It's a field, and it's pushing velocities in one direction with some noise. But I just like it because it's so convenient. And then what else do we have here? You see these gas disturbances. Now, in the previous example, I was masking them with the speed field, but I'm also masking them with the density mask field. And what that is doing is, let me showcase it on one of them. So again, I don't want turbulence happening on the whole thing. You can see turbulence is happening only here in the, right, not on all of them. And that is because I am using, is it this, the second one? So density test 2 is actually, so this density mask. And what this is, it's these spikes. So I'm only applying turbulence where I have these density spikes. And when they die off, and they do quite quickly, the turbulence will stop affecting the simulation. So I'm only affecting the really beginning, the simulation at the very beginning, and at the very specific parts that are moving the fastest. And then I kind of stop, especially with these ones. Yeah, control influence is 1. So these are just controlled, really controlled gas disturbances based on based on other fields. In this case, I just called it density test 2. So that's how you can control your density as well. So all the other things are quite standard. I have, like I said, the forces are here. Collision source. I don't know why I was adding it twice. Actually, no, this collision source is here by default. Yeah, it's here by default. It's actually this guy. So this, the second volume for collision. And then you cache this. It looks like this. And I think it looks pretty good. And this is here. You see this, the spikiness, and it doesn't billow. It remains spiky, and then it kind of breaks off. And that's how you do it. You do it with those pumps. The pumps, guys, the pumps are the answer. The pumps, and you can also do it with, you have to add point velocity to break the velocity. I know it's so simple. This is it. You need this velocity happening here. I know I'm jumping around a bit too fast, but I just want to show you so much, but it's really difficult because there's a lot of stuff. But yeah, once you have this, you get this simulation. I think it's too uniform. This one especially, I created 4 different variations, but this one is a bit too uniform. Like, I would like to see, so if I was an art director right now and somebody would show me this, I will tell him, look, it's amazing. It looks great. But this needs to be higher. And then we need some of them that are bigger. This one, maybe make it smaller. So you would just create more variation in shape. Right now, when I look at this, all I see is a box, maybe like this. And that's not good. You need more here. Bigger, smaller, higher up, and maybe kill this one a bit. So that this would be like then art directing it. But I did fix that in the other versions. But I think I was just basing this off the emitter. I think the emitter actually looks good, but then the shapes actually, sometimes you don't know how exactly it's going to turn out. And then if you guys were wondering how I did the color, it's quite simple. And on the main emitter, in the pyro source, you just add a field called color. And then I colored the whole thing. You can do it based on noise and just emit different and I think I was noising it up. Yeah, I think, yeah. So I was noising up color here. So you can see you get this. So it's still kind of white with some black parts here. And on my second emitter, which is this one, I was doing the same thing, but it's a bit more bright. So that's how you get these more extreme variations in, you see here, like if you just look at the color, this is brown, and then this is white, and this is more dark gray. So that's how you get the variation. And I was creating the ground element separately. So this is just the ground element. Again, you can see I was doing the same techniques where it doesn't billow out completely. You still get a shape, a directional shape. You see this, like the spikiness of it. It keeps it contained. It doesn't just become a billow kind of explosion. And that's how you do it with the pump again. So if I show you, and I know you heard this a million times. If I say pump one more time, I swear I'm gonna lose it. Emitter, pump. So the pump is bigger and it's gonna last a bit longer. That's it. But it's the same emitter. So try it. Try it on your own explosions, and you can thank me later. And there are 2 separate elements, and I was retiming it, so it's a bit faster in the beginning. So yeah, using post-processing tricks, you don't have to nail the timing in the explosion. Most of the time, it's impossible. Just do it post-process. I'm not going to cover the sparks. They're just sparks. I mean, we're going to cover them in the workshop, though. Sparks. I mean, particles, I guess. They do add a lot, though. I have to say, they add a lot. But I'm using the same. Look at this. Look at this. The same emitter. Same emitter. Pop network. Look at this. So professional. Yeah, it's mostly, I'm reading the comments again, but yeah, it's mostly about the source. Yeah. Yeah, just pump everything. That's it. And then, yeah, the secret sauce that like I said, I can't really show you because then we have to keep something for the workshop itself. But the secret sauce is then the pyro scatter. So look at this. This makes it look how it should look. And then we have the two materials that make up everything at the end. And to complete the scene, I created 3 different ones, 3 different variations, and I was just rotating them and placing them by hand in this case. You could create a procedural system where it would actually place them automatically, but I'm just old-fashioned and I just like placing things by hand. And then RBD, which I think we should have more of, and different variations in shapes. And I don't think the RBD was that visible. And the sparks. And then everything combined is the final result. I don't know why this one is so white. No idea. Probably the visualizer is broken. But yeah, this is mostly it for the 2 examples that I wanted to show you from the workshop. But I do have one more that is actually, let me just close this. And this is with the Houdini 18.5, because so many people were asking us, oh, are you going to show the 18.5 tools? And sure, we will. Why not? So somebody asked, what is a pump? A pump is a field. That's actually a good point. What is a pump? Let me go back. What is a pump? A pump is a field, which is the same. So if you go to your pyro source, not this one, you create a custom field called pump and a velocity, right? So you output that in your null here. We go to our emitter, because pumps are important, guys. Like we need to get to the bottom of this. Where is it? Pumps. These guys are pumps. You import it. See, null 20. I just do this. Import it here. Source volume target field is called a pump. And then you import your velocity. Your target field is vel. Vel is the field, and then this is the velocity that I had here. Velocity, name v, and then you multiply it. You multiply it with the pump. That's it. And then this is the 18.5 tools, which, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into these because you can just watch the presentation and I think they're going to have another one tomorrow and the day after for 18.5 tools. But this is essentially kind of it. So what I was doing here is, let me show you. I was creating curves, and based on those curves, and that's this example where the curves were actually spawning towards us. So this is what I was saying, that you can create a procedural system for your explosions. I just choose sometimes to do it manually by hand. So if we go here to 5s, just so you can see this, how this looks. You see that? It's going to spawn them based on those curves. I think that's pretty cool. And because I don't know how long this webinar is. How long are we going on this? 2 hours! Oh my God. Okay, because this webinar is already 2 hours long, we're going to give you the HIP files. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to send them to Caleb, and Caleb can then upload them to you guys here. But this is how I did this. Let me just quickly, okay, this is the last thing. Curve, you draw curves, right? It doesn't matter. You just draw some curves. Resample them because you need the curve view. Actually, you don't need, I'm lying, you don't need it. The curve view attribute is going to give you a gradient from 0 to 1 for each curve. But I tried it with this. I didn't want it like that. So what I ended up doing is I mapped the curve view into the p.x. So this is going to be 0 to 75. That's my p.x. If we check this, it's going to give us a value like this. So it's going to be from 0 to 1 based on our x-axis. And then you use that. You use that with the attribute adjust float. And you adjust your start frame. The start frame is something that is that you can control with your pyro source here. I don't know where it is. But trust me, it's here somewhere. Burst animation should be here. Oh no, I can't find it. It's a new tool. I don't know where it is. But there is a burst. There's a thing. There's a thing somewhere that uses this attribute called the start frame. And then you use the curve view to remap that start frame. So this is a new node. So you remap it. It's here, start frame. You see it goes from 0 to 70. So exactly where this ends. And this will now animate at what start frame the animation is going to happen. Cool. So that's how you do do that for the emission. And then you just rasterize it. You rasterize the burn temperature density. You do the pyro trail path. And like I said, we're going to give you guys the files so you can play around with this, because I think we're a bit over the time limit already. But you get the trails, pyro source, trail source, and it's going to give you this. So this is what I was saying. I was doing all of that with the RBD tools. So that's the different approach that you can take. But it was just that, yeah, I took the RBD approach. This is cool and it's fun to do, but I just like the RBD approach more. And then you just do the thing. You put it into a Pyrosolver, and it's going to do the explosions. And now we have the pyro bake volume, which is the pyro look. And it's very similar to our scatter tool that we did. Very similar. It even has some of the same parameters that you need to create this look. And then you render it. And that's it. And that's how you get this. Sweet, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I talked too much about things, but it was just so much information to actually convey. It's like my brain was just racing. So because this was a more broad look in Pyro, I think the next one we can do a more specific one. so we can maybe actually do it from scratch and actually show you how it's built. And obviously, we want to do flip. We want to show you how to do fluids, magic, environments, all of that. And even maybe we're going to probably start doing podcasts where we just talk about VFX in general and art. But yeah, I think that's it. And see you guys in the next one. Bye.